Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with End Time Ministries, and I do thank you for joining me for Tuesday's edition of End of the Age. So it's one of the hottest topics talked about in our news today, open borders. Should we yield to the pressures of the international community and open our borders to whosoever will to come into the United States? Or should we protect our borders, protect our nation, and know who is living amongst us? It's a very big question in the news, and I think we're going to talk about it today because there are prophetic implications to the efforts to open our borders. So we've got to talk about it. It's all in the news, and I'm going to discuss that today. We're going to get into all kinds of stuff. Open borders, Hillary Clinton, George Soros, and world government. What a program. So let's get off into it because I've got a lot of information to cover today. And it's very important because this affects you and I. I mean, here just a couple years ago, they had a cartoon, a Mohammed cartoon drawing competition down here, just down the road from us, just down George Bush from our offices here. And a couple guys ended up being killed who jumped out and were going to try to defend Muhammad, and they were killed by our police here just down the road. So this is not something that happens always on the other side of the world. This happened right down the road from End Time Ministries. So we need to talk about it because if we do what Europe has done and open their borders, this will come more to the United States. So we've got to talk about it and the prophetic implications of it. So always remember this: open borders equal a move towards the prophesied one world government or the process of globalization. I have a question for you. How are the European Union's open border policies working out for them? Have you heard what's going on over the last few months? All of the terrorist acts? Well, they have open border policies. How is that working out for them? Well, the Times in the UK actually reports that intelligence officers have identified 23,000 jihadist extremists living in just Britain alone as potential terrorist attackers. Open border policies, everybody. And this is exactly what President Trump is trying to protect America against. But there are those here in the United States that are trying to come against Trump because they believe in a world government. They believe we should just throw the borders open and let whosoever will come in. Where do you stand on that topic today? Well, according to CNS News, in several tweets yesterday morning, President Donald Trump doubled down on his travel ban and criticized his own Justice Department for watering down the original ban out of political correctness. A couple of Donald Trump's tweets were, "People, the lawyers and the courts can call it whatever they want, but I'm calling it what we need and what it really is, a travel ban." Well, of course, this upset all kinds of people who believe we should have open borders. In another tweet, Donald Trump said, "In any event, we are extreme vetting people coming into the United States in order to help keep our country safe. The courts are slow and political." So you'll hear about it on some of the news sources that Donald Trump wants to actually protect our borders and build a wall. The liberals are all against that. But yet he's saying, look, if we can't protect our borders, we can't protect our country. We have no more nation. And that's what he's trying to do. So the travel ban issue, many of you all have read about it. It actually returned to the headlines Saturday when President Trump tweeted after the terror attack that just happened in London. He said, we need to be smart, everyone, vigilant and tough. We need the courts to give us back our rights. We need the travel ban as an extra level of safety. Now, he's not wanting to ban every individual coming into the United States, but he's saying there are some people that we do need to ban, and I agree with him. The original travel ban issued by executive order on January 27th applied to 7 countries: Iraq, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. A district court in Washington immediately blocked enforcement of the ban nationwide, and a few weeks later, a panel of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals refused to lift the injunction pending appeal. Well, then on March 6th, the Trump administration issued a revised executive order removing Iraq from the list of countries, among other small changes. But on March 16th, a federal judge in Maryland put Trump's second order on hold, and the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld that injunction as well. Then last week, the Trump administration asked the Supreme Court to review the judgment of the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. The Justice Department says that President Trump's travel ban is actually well within his lawful authority to keep the nation safe. Because you see, what's happening is Donald Trump is watching what's going on over in Europe. And he's seeing all their open border policies and what's going on. And all of the jihadist extremists that are in those countries. And he's saying, now hold on a second. They've got open border policies. Look what's going on over there. What are we going to do for the United States? Well, anybody in their right mind has got to say, we've got to vet these people. We've got to close our borders until we really know what's going on here. Do you agree with him or don't you? It's a question, because there's a lot of people that say, no, just throw the borders open and let whosoever will come in. Where do you stand on the issue? It's a very important question we need to ask ourselves. Well, folks, I want you to understand that what is going on here. It's very important. President Trump is fighting against the establishment here in America, in this country, to close our borders. He's fighting against that. They want to close our borders. He wants to close our borders to illegal immigrants to protect our nation. Without borders, you have no more nation. The establishment, or those elitists that believe in and are working towards the establishment of a world government, he's having to fight against them on this issue. And to achieve this, they want to just throw the borders open. They're promoting open border policies across the globe, not just here in the United States, but they are promoting it here. And this is what Donald Trump is battling. The press is coming against them. The press that is ruled by the establishment, they're trying to come against Donald Trump for wanting to close our borders. Now I want you to really understand what's going on here. And it's a move to establish a one world government in the earth. And I'll get to that here in a second. And really, this was one of the main issues during the recent presidential campaign. Hillary Clinton, who believes in world government, was promoting open borders, while Donald Trump opposed open borders and wanted to build a wall. So always remember this. Always remember, when you're reading your news, doing your research, always remember, the promotion of open borders or globalization equals a move towards the prophesied world government. And we'll get to the prophecy here in just a little bit. Most of you understand the Bible prophesies a world government. Well, these are moves towards the establishment of that. Donald Trump is fighting against that. So let's really discuss open borders and world government through the eyes of a little bit of history and what happened between the potential presidential candidate that ran against Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton. The Washington Times reports that Hillary Clinton actually embraced George Soros's radical vision of an open border world. Hillary Clinton aligned herself closely with a vision for America laid out by her benefactor, left-wing financier George Soros, who talks continually of international governance, more open borders, increased Muslim immigration, and diminished U.S. global power. The phrase American exceptionalism is not part of Mr. Soros's agenda. He wrote back in 1998 that the sovereignty, and the reason I'm going through this is I want you to understand open borders, the whole goal is world government. He wrote back in 1998, the sovereignty of the states must be subordinated to international law and international institutions. So forget the fact the United States signed the Declaration of Independence. That's irrelevant. The nation states need to be subjected to international law and international institutions. He's calling for a world government. He stated that we need some global system of political decision making, and in short, we need a global society to support our global economy. Now this, Mr. Soros wrote that. Well, on the topic of open, now there he's calling for a world government. But on the topic of open borders, which is really what we're discussing today, Mr. Soros has complained of national borders as an impediment to the world ruling bodies. He wants to do away with nation states, create a global nation that answers to a global government. That's his goal here. And he sees open borders, or he sees people that are trying to protect their borders as getting in the way of that, as of his goal. He finances at least 7 groups in the United States that promote open borders and mass immigration. WikiLeaks' massive release of hacked campaign emails, they actually showed that in one of Mrs. Clinton's paid speeches to the bankers, she pledged to work for open borders. Her dream, quote unquote dream, presumably meant that the southern U.S. border would be a conduit for untold numbers of immigrants. She told a closed-door audience at a Brazilian bank in Bangkok in May of 2013 that, quote unquote, my dream is a hemispheric common market with open trade and open borders. So now we look, we know that, and I've got, this is all documented, but open borders, the whole goal of that to these elitists, these people that believe in a one world government, they're trying to establish a one world government. So they've got to open the borders. European Union, look what's happened there. Europe has thrown their borders open. Immigrants have came in and it is a mess. And it's right now it's about every other weekend or so that they're having killings and different things from these Muslim immigrants that are coming in. So let's talk about Muslim immigration for a second, because this is really what Donald Trump is trying to stem off. Not all Muslims, but he wants to really vet them to the point where he can keep terrorists from coming into the country. I've got a friend of mine. You say, well, how close is it coming to home? I've got a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine. His brother works for ICE, which is Immigration Customs Enforcement. And he said that they already know of known cells working here in the United States. And of course, they've got their eye up on them, but they're already here. So Donald Trump knows this very well, I promise you. And he's saying, look, we've got to close our borders here. We've got to be able to protect what we have and then really, really vet the people that are coming in, because if we just open our borders to everybody, we're going to be in the same situation that the European Union's in. So Mr. Soros, remember, who believes in a one world government, is a big proponent of bringing more Muslims into Europe and by extension into America. He has funded private groups helping Muslims enter Germany and other countries, and he wants Europe to borrow billions of dollars to pay for resettling them. He wrote in the Australian newspaper back in 2015 that Europe should bring in 1 million Muslim refugees per year for the foreseeable future. How do you think Europe's thinking about that now with all of these terrorist acts that they've had? How is the open borders policy working for them. Now we need to watch it, because it could be precursors. If we threw our borders open, it's precursors to what could happen here in the United States. But remember the goal: world government. Mr. Soros told Bloomberg News that our plan treats the protection of refugees as the objective and national borders as the obstacle. So he sees borders around nations as an obstacle to his goal of a one world government. So let's talk about open borders. That's really what's going on in the news. It was huge in this previous campaign. One candidate wanted to throw the borders open, and one candidate said, we're going to build a wall. We're going to protect our borders. So in 2016, illegal aliens were crossing the Mexican border at a record pace. It's really uncertain the number of illegal aliens presently living in the United States because they're reluctant to self-identify. However, the Pew Research Center estimated the illegal population in 2016 to be about 11.3 million, 40% higher than the previous record in 2014. Now, there's no lack of opinions in the debate on open borders versus secured borders, immigration, amnesty, and a path to citizenship for those in the country illegally. Those in favor of open borders argue that immigration is the cornerstone of America, and the nations have an obligation to those seeking a better life or protection from persecution. Opponents to open borders argue that the first duty of any sovereign nation is the security of its citizens, and controlled borders and immigration are a necessary means to that end. So you say, well, hold on a minute. We signed a Declaration of Independence to be out from under any world governing body, and we don't want to conform to this open border policies because it'll do away with our nation. Well, let's talk about national sovereignty, because as of late, the liberal news sources and things have tried to make national sovereignty kind of the bad words. National sovereignty. Well, national sovereignty is this. It's an absolute autonomy and equal right of a nation to govern its own affairs. Property, its property within its borders, its policies, and its people without the interference or assistance from another nation or a world government. It's called national sovereignty. Prior to the 17th century, there were really, if you remember, there were kingdoms and empires of vast territory with diverse languages and ethnicity. Powerful kings and dictators ruled all over the citizens, many of whom were treated as slaves with no pathway to freedom. Nationalism, really back then, really didn't even exist. And eventually, those kingdoms and empires fell under their own weight, and a system of sovereign nation states emerged. Now today you have the United States, Africa, Russia, they're nation states. Well, national sovereignty required legally defined lines where each nation began and ended. Boundaries, borders. Some of the nation states were defined by natural borders such as rivers or mountain ranges, but mostly the borders were man-made. You have a map, and you can see the outline of all the nation states. Well, over the past several decades, national sovereignty and border control have become less emphasized due to the increased mobility of people for travel, work, trade, and international investments. And this free flow of people has resulted in global interdependence. Now that's the goal at the end of the day. Global interdependence, a world government. And really, nations have relinquished their independence in order to engage in globalization, free trade with the world. So you say, well, okay, globalization, what's that? Well, globalization is the interdependence of nations and their citizens without the equal right of self-determination and exclusive control over their country, people, and policies. So, to put it simply, globalism is the belief that the nation state is now obsolete and that the world must move into a system of global governance. Clearly stated, globalist these elitists, people that believe in a world government, they believe that national borders, George Soros is a perfect example, national borders should be dissolved and a one world government should be instituted, and that proponents interchange terms. You've heard them in the news. Proponents really interchange terms such as one world government, international community, a global citizen. Anytime somebody talks about the international community decided this, the international community came against this nation, it's the world government. There is an international community. There's very few national communities. They're doing away with their borders, and this is the goal. They make globalization sound all, great, like this. It's this great humanitarian thing. It's a good thing. But does globalization bring risk and unintended consequences? Absolutely. Will it eventually evolve into another vast empire and kingdom that will enslave its citizens? Actually, yes, it's going to. The Bible prophesies it as a world government that will be ruled over by the Antichrist before it's all over with. We're watching it being established in our world today. That's why it's important that we talk about open borders today. Because open borders, tearing down our borders, doing away with the nation state, having a global nation that answers to a world governing body, that's the goal. And that's what Donald Trump is wrestling with. He wants to protect our borders, but those that believe in a world government want to do away with our borders. It's called the process of globalism. Now, we've got to ask this question. Open borders, the open border policies, have they worked in Europe? Europe has open border policies. How is it working for them? For years, European globalists, those that believe in a world government in favor of a unified Europe, work toward the removal of national sovereignty and towards an European interdependence, all of the nations doing away with their borders and just having one big European Union interdependent upon each other. They encouraged open borders and the free movement of people and goods across the continent. Ultimately, in 1985, 22 countries and 4 European Free Trade Associate member states signed the Schengen Agreement that created a single European territory which covered most of mainland Europe. Schengen created a borderless Europe which allows citizens of the signatory nations as well as non-European nationalists and tourists freedom to cross internal borders for travel, business, or establishing a new residence, all without border checks. So just like someone could live in Texas and trade in Oklahoma, I can go up there and sell something, whatever I want to do, no problem. Same way in Europe right now. So the agreement was implemented fully in 1995 after the end of the Cold War. Participating member states forfeited their sovereignty based on the premise that they would have more liberty and economic prosperity. Well, that sounds great, doesn't it? That all sounds wonderful. However, here's the big however. They failed to predict that unsecured borders, now remember, this is what Donald Trump is fighting. Unsecured borders also would allow the entry of individuals, some of whom are terrorists intent on overtaking mainland Europe and establishing a new empire. So they sold this on the fact that, hey, free trade, economic prosperity. But they forgot, they didn't even take into account all of these new people that would come in. Some of them are terrorists. And now, look at what's happening as a result of their open border policies. So this is why Europe's open borders have created a security crisis due to the uncontrolled and unchecked entry of non-European nationalists who do not share the same values as their host countries and have no intention of assimilating into their culture or political ideology. They're trying to set up their own system, their own laws, their own religious system. So to the contrary, the terrorists are intent on destroying democracy and freedom to restructure Europe into an Islamic caliphate. That's what they're trying to do. Terrorist attacks in the European Union have increased exponentially since '95. Terrorists have murdered more than 500 and injured countless others across Europe from 2004 to 2017. Most of you will recognize some of the more recent and deadly attacks. On November 13th, 2015, gunmen and suicide bombers in Paris killed 130 and wounded hundreds in a series of attacks, and ISIS claimed responsibility for that. On January 7th, 2015, two Islamic terrorist brothers bombed a Paris newspaper office, the Charlie Hebdo, and they killed 11 and wounded several others, and ISIS claimed responsibility. On March 22nd, 2016, two suicide bombers killed 48 and injured hundreds in 3 explosions at the Brussels, Belgium airport. I flew out of that airport the next few days after that happened. And man, you can feel the weight of that when you've been in the airport. And they bombed a downtown subway stop. ISIS claimed responsibility for that. On July 14, 2016, a man killed 86 and injured hundreds when he plowed his truck into a crowd celebrating Bastille Day in Nice along with French Riviera, and ISIS claimed responsibility for that. March 22nd, 2017, a terrorist truck drove a truck into a crowd of tourists outside of London's Houses of Parliament on Westminster Bridge, killing 5 and injuring 40 others. ISIS claimed responsibility. And on June 3rd, just a few days ago, 7 people were killed and 48 injured in a terror attack in central London. The attack began late Saturday night when a white van struck pedestrians on London Bridge. The suspects then left the vehicle and a number of people were stabbed, including an on-duty British transport police officer who was responding to the incident. We'll continue on with our discussion on open borders lead to world government when we come back from the break.
From Here to Armageddon, a new exciting 8-lesson series to share with your friends and family. Order yours right away.
Answering many questions like how far are we from the Battle of Armageddon? What will happen between now and then? Where are we on the timeline? Your questions answered in this exciting 8-lesson series, From Here to Armageddon.
Go to endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-END-TIME, 1-800-363-8463. Order yours right away.
Today I have some exciting news to share with you. You can now become a magazine subscriber for life. You will receive first-class benefits that will include a lifetime membership to End Time Magazine, as well as an unlimited access to the digital version of the magazine. You will also receive 20% off of all future orders at endtime.com, well, at least till the rapture happens. Never worry about missing one important issue or forgetting to renew. You can rest assured when something happens in the news pertaining to Bible prophecy, you will be informed with the most recent cutting-edge material available. End Time Magazine has been the forefront of End Time Ministries since the beginning, and we would love to join with you in this first ever opportunity of becoming a magazine subscriber for life. Join today by calling 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463, or go to endtime.com.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the Watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the Archives button.
So you can see what's happened in Europe. And remember, it was sold to them as, hey, prosperity, open trade, let's just open our borders. But they neglected the fact that it's going to bring in all kinds of people, and it's brought in terrorists into their country. And now look at what's happened. I mean, it's happening really close together now, and it's alarming. But the fact of the matter is, what has it been sold as here in the United States? There are people that are saying, oh, we can't close our borders, we're interdependent, and it's going to bring prosperity, and it's going to bring this, that, and the other. Just like they sold it to the people of Europe, they're trying to sell it to the people of the United States. But the fact of the matter is what we need to watch here in the United States, because remember, open borders, the goal is world government. So we need to look at what's going on in Europe, and I promise you, if we threw our borders open, what's going on in Europe, that'll come to the United States. It already has in a small measure. We've had a few incidents, but it'll get more and more and more. So what we need to do is look at Europe's open borders. They should be a warning for us living here in America. Our founding fathers understood that uncontrolled immigration and the failure to assimilate would endanger the America they envisioned, you and I. America has liberal and fair immigration policies for those entering the country legally. Come in. I'm all about immigration. Come in. My family immigrated here. But the fact of the matter is, it's okay to come, but you got to come legally. I don't want terrorists pouring across the border because they're not even going to be asking any questions. Just come one, come all. Do you want that? All of you that are listening, I know some of you are listening overseas, but the people living here in America that are listening to me, would you want people just flooding across the border? No. You believe in protecting the border. So when you listen to the liberal news media that says, oh, Donald Trump's trying to protect the border, now you can have a little bit of background behind this and look at what's going on in Europe, because I promise you, what's going on over there will end up here if we throw our borders wide open. And so really part of the naturalization process includes studying for those coming in legally, it includes studying the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, learning America's history, taking a citizenship test, and pledging allegiance to America's flag and the republic for which it stands. Here it is, one nation under God, with liberty and justice for all. Not any God, but the God of the Bible. One nation under God, the God of the Bible. Not any God. We're not pledging allegiance to any God here. It's one nation under the God of the Bible. That's who we're pledging allegiance to, that flag. One nation under God, the God of the Bible. And then the pledge to the republic encompasses loyalty to fundamental principles that form this nation. Over the past decades, several decades, the federal government has not enforced external border control and immigration policies. And thus, the homeland is at risk for people entering intent on doing harm. We have to enforce our border policies. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that from a Christian standpoint. Just come in legally. That's all we're saying. If you want to come in illegally, you got to think, what's going on here? And, drug cartels are exploiting the unsecured borders by trafficking people, weapons, and illegal drugs. Many in the illegal alien population refuse to learn English or pledge their allegiance to America. Instead, they brandish the flag of their homeland and burn the American flag. They ignore the very notion of assimilation. And just as in Europe, America is at risk from radical Islamism. The Washington Times reported in 2015 that ISIS is operating a camp in northern Mexico, just 8 miles from the United States border town of El Paso, Texas. In 2015, the Border Patrol in Arizona captured 5 men from Pakistan and 1 from Afghanistan embedded in a group of Mexicans attempting to enter this country illegally. Now, this followed the capture of 8 Syrians attempting to enter Texas from Mexico a few days prior to that. A former CIA intelligence officer, Michael Schur, blames the 3 prior administrations for failing to close the border. He believes it would have been naive to think that Islamic jihadists would not use the southern border to gain entry into the country. either naive or simply ignoring it because you believed in a one world government, you'd have to be silly not to take, he stated, you'd have to be silly not to take advantage of that opportunity. You can say many things about the Islamists, but silly, they are not. They're not, they may be brutal, but they are not dumb. And Shur said we are the dumb ones for allowing that to happen. Shur led the team that monitored and tracked Osama bin Laden. Now, based on the immigration crisis in Europe and the security risk of the porous southern border, question is, will Americans realize the Founding Fathers' wisdom and foresight regarding secured borders, that it is irrelevant today? Borders are, and this is in essence what it all boils down to, borders are the front line of defense to a secured nation, period. Take down your borders, anybody can come in. And until there is a fail-proof method to determine who's entering the country with evil intentions, if you're coming in legally, that's great. You want to come in and pursue your American dream, that's awesome. Come to college here, whatever you want to do. It's the greatest nation on the face of the earth, period. I've been to a lot of other countries, and in my opinion, of course I was born and raised here, but in my opinion, it's the greatest nation on the face of the earth. We're a lighthouse to the world, honestly. If you've been all over the world, United States is a lighthouse to the world. Are we perfect? No. But we still are a lighthouse to the world. But the fact of the matter is, if you tear down our borders, we can't even, borders are our first line of defense to people entering the country with evil intentions. Border control is vital to the survival of this nation. And unlike oppressive nations that use border to imprison their citizens and impose a harsh existence, America must use her borders to keep out individuals intending harm to her citizens and their way of life. We've got to protect our borders. This is exactly what Donald Trump is trying to do. Is Donald Trump perfect? No. But he's trying to protect our borders, and I stand behind him 110%. The Statue of Liberty echoes the sentiments of the founders. She lifts her lamp and invites the tired, the poor, huddled masses yearning to breathe free, not the free uploaders or usurpers, and especially not terrorists. This is the greatest nation on earth. I don't want terrorists coming in here trying to establish a whole nother way of life and a caliphate and all this other mess. Don't want that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God. Which God is that? The God of the Bible. Not any other God, the one true God of the Bible. That's the only reason I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, because it is subservient to the one God of the Bible. And that's what I believe, and that's what I pledge allegiance to. If they ever take one nation under God out of that, I can't say pledge allegiance to that anymore. But while they recognize that this nation is subservient to the God of the Bible, I'm on board 110%. It's the greatest nation on the face of the earth because of that. So you say, well, wow, open borders. I didn't realize all this was going on. And what's going on in Europe could happen over here. Absolutely. Open borders, always remember this. Open borders and globalism. You say, what's the goal behind it all? Global governments. Open borders and globalism equal world government. Always remember that. When you read about it in the news and they try to sell it on this, well, we need globalism and we need open borders because we need free trade and this, that, and the other. That all sounds peachy keen. Free trade and prosperity, and it all sounds great. But they're not telling you that if we throw our borders open, the mess that's going on in the European Union, it will be at our doorstep if it's not here already. Because several of the previous administrations didn't enforce our border patrol. And so it's become a mess. A lot of these people are here already. So let's talk about the open borders lead to world government? Because the Bible prophesies a world government that will be established in the earth just prior to the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ. So let's talk about open borders and world government. The number one issue by far in America's recent presidential campaign was globalism. And we need to talk about this because it's in our news every day. And you say, well, the election's done away with. The election is done. President Trump has been elected. But you know why the liberal media and all these celebrities and people are attacking Trump so bad? To where, oh, we need to impeach him and we need to do this, that, and the other. Because these are people who believe in open borders, world government, in doing away with the nation state that is the United States of America. They've bought into this. And so they're attacking Trump when he says, I'm going to pull us out of the Paris Climate Agreement, which is a huge move towards a world government. I did a program on it last week, and I said, look, watch what's going to happen. Donald Trump pulls us out of the Paris Climate Agreement, and all of the liberal news media, everybody's going to be screaming and attacking him. And the world leaders that are all bought into this world governing ideology, they're going to be screaming at Trump because he's pulling the United States out of that. And I was doing cartwheels because I'm all for not being part of the world government. That's what Donald Trump was doing, and what happens? They all started screaming. They all started making fun of him and using curse words and calling him names and doing all kinds of stuff. Because he's standing in the face of this world governing body. And that's exactly what we should want to happen. So many voters during this past election realized that the one issue that could determine the future course of the United States that really got it was that open borders or the process of globalization could lead to world government, and that we were headed down that road. And so you say, well, what is globalism? I want to make sure you know very, very clear, because they're trying to sell globalism as this great, wonderful thing. It absolutely is not. Remember, globalism is simply the belief that the nation state is now obsolete and that the world must move into a system of world government. And really, just to be frank, globalists believe national borders should be dissolved and a one world government should be instituted. And I tell you what, I'll continue on. I'm coming up to a thought here, but I know we're coming up to a break, and I want to make sure that I don't cut this in half. But I'm going to come back with you to some quotes from some world leaders who believe in a world government and what they're trying to establish. These guys are all about doing away with the borders of America. Not other nations, but, well, they're for other nations as well. But these guys are right here in America saying, let's do away with borders. We want a world government.
Most people have dreamed of someday walking on the ground where Jesus walked over 2,000 years ago. You don't have to wait any longer. Make this the year for your life-changing experience. This is your official invitation to join Judy and me for our 2017 Fall End Time Prophecy Tour. The trip of a lifetime is a severe understatement. If you could travel to any place on earth, your first choice should definitely be the Holy Land. There is simply no other place like it. Call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 for more information. Ask to speak to Holly or Jana about the tour.
So globalists, people that believe in a world government, they believe that nation states should be done away with, borders should be done away with, and that we should all have a world community that answers to a world government. Strobe Talbot stated that in his this really stated this most clearly in his article, The Birth of a Global Nation. And this was all the way back in 92, folks. We're in 2017. And he stated within the next 100 years, nationhood, or the nation states, as we know it, will be obsolete. All states will recognize a single global authority or a world government. And then 2 years later, after writing this in Time magazine, Strobe Talbot was tapped by President Bill Clinton to serve as the Deputy Secretary of State, where he pushed his global agenda until the end of the Clinton presidency in 2001. Guess what Strobe Talbot does today? He's the president of the Brookings Institute, one of the main think tanks in America, pushing policy and this, that, and the other. And he believes in doing away with open borders, or doing away with our borders, having open borders, and in the promotion of a one world government. So you say, one world government, where's that in the Bible? What are you talking about this today for? The Bible prophesies a world government. The two most famous prophecy books in the Bible, Daniel and Revelation, clearly prophesy a world government for the very near future. Daniel 7:23 says it like this. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. This passage refers to the last day dictator, the Antichrist, who will rule the world just before the second coming of Jesus Christ to the earth. Then Daniel 7:24 through 27 states that this world government will continue up until the return of Jesus Christ, when the kingdom will be established on the earth. Then Revelation 13:7 says, states this about the Antichrist and his one world government. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds, tongues, and nations, a world government. And Revelation 13:5 even tells how long the world government will continue. And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. These 42 months refer to the time of the Great Tribulation, culminating with the second coming of Jesus Christ to the earth. So we know that the world government is coming into power now, but the Antichrist will sit at the helm of that and rule the earth with an iron rod just the final 3.5 years prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. It's that time of great tribulation there. So that's where the Bible prophesies it. And there's a couple other places, but that's specifically where the Bible prophesies it. There's a couple other places that talk about that, but the main two are Daniel 7 and Revelation 13. A couple more places talk about the Antichrist. So you say, well, who's promoting this emerging world government? Anybody who believes in the one world government is promoting it. The establishment owns the liberal news media, so they're coming against Trump with all of their might. They're trying to make him look like a buffoon, but thankfully he's standing in the face of that mess and saying, don't want any part of it. And then there's a lot of movie stars that have bought into it, and they're promoting this one world governing agenda. Any movie star that's promoting global warming, which leads to climate change, globalization, open borders, all this stuff, they bought into the ideology of a one world government. They sold their soul to people who believe in this one, the establishment that believes in this one world governing body. Who's preaching about it? Well, the drive towards the one world government, it didn't just happen yesterday. It's been in progress really for a long time, decades. The following are actions or quotes by really many prominent world leaders promoting globalism. And to begin with, the fall of the Berlin Wall was really a march toward, it's one of the big events that led us into this New World Order or towards a world government. And the fall of the Berlin Wall on November 9th, 1989 signaled the end of the Cold War. Mikhail Gorbachev, George H.W. Bush, Pope John Paul II, they all met together, and 20 days later, they came out of those meetings announcing the birth of the New World Order. Then George H.W. Bush, shortly after the meeting with Gorbachev and the Pope, Bush Sr. said, we have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order. when we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this New World Order, an order in which a credible United Nations, which is the world governing body on earth today, along with others, can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders. Well, the UN founder, obviously, the guy that wrote the charter was a convicted communist spy, Al-Jarhis. So yes, today, the UN is carrying out their charter, which not one word of that is changed. It's a one world government. Then Bill Clinton's speech at the UN in September 22nd, clear back in 97, he stated, "The forces of global integration are a great tide, inexorably wearing away the established order of things. The United Nations must play a leading role in this effort, filling in the fault lines of the new global era." He was a believer. He's a liberal internationalist. He believed in a world government. Strobe Talbot worked for him. And then Walter Cronkite, the most, I'm going to say, quote unquote, the most trusted man in America, America's newsman. He stated that it seems to many of us that if we are to avoid the eventual catastrophic world conflict, we must strengthen the United Nations as a step toward a world government patterned after our own government with a legislature, executive, and judiciary, and police to enforce its international laws and keep the peace. So he's saying we need a world government here, folks. He said to do that, of course, we Americans will have to yield up some of our sovereignty. And he stated that's going to be a bitter pill. It would take a lot of courage, a lot of faith in the new order. He stated, today we must develop federal structures on a global level. We need a system of enforceable world law, a democratic federal world government to deal with the problems of our world. Now, Walter Cronkite made this statement while he was accepting the 99 Norman Cousins Global Governance Award, which is given annually to the World Federalist Association, by the World Federalist Association, to the person doing the most to promote world government. Walter Cronkite won the award. He was a huge advocate of world government. But he actually, during the speech, he said, now, while I was a newsman, I had to kind of remain unbiased, but he said, now that I've retired, I'm going to let you know what I really think. And then he gave that speech. We need a world government. Of course, David Rockefeller, he's recently passed on. He was the chairman of the board with Chase Bank. He was Mr. Establishment himself here in the United States. Well, you say, well, with the passing of David Rockefeller, the establishment's going to go away. No. The establishment is charging on, I promise you. The establishment is very well established, and they do not like Donald Trump. They don't like him pulling out of this Paris Climate Agreement. They don't like him wanting to build a wall. David Rockefeller, who was a huge proponent of global government, said this: "Some even believe that we, the Rockefeller family, are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty and I am proud of it." He just said, I've been accused of wanting to build a world government and I'm guilty. That came from his memoirs on page 405, and it was published in 2002. David Rockefeller also stated this, and this statement, I mean, imagine somebody saying this in a news article or something like that. In the end, really, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. He actually stated this: "We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world." What plan's that? A world government. if we had been subject to the bright lights of publicity during those years. So they're saying the New York Times, Time Magazine, Washington Post, they all knew about it. They attended our meetings, but they promised discretion. And so they wouldn't report on these things we were talking about because we never could have got our agenda pushed forward if they'd have put it in the news. So you wonder who the liberal media are today? I just gave you 3 of them. But the work is now much more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supernatural sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practiced in past centuries. David Rockefeller was the founder of the Trilateral Commission, and he stated this in an address to a meeting of the Trilateral Commission in June of 1991. Now, these quotes promoting world government, these are a small sample of leaders that have come to believe the answer to global peace and security is a one world government. If Hillary Clinton would have won the recent election, folks, you thought Obama was for a one world government? You have seen nothing until if Hillary Clinton would have got in. And so this idea the idea of a world government has been promoted in our colleges, the press, business circles, and even throughout religious institutions until it has gained virtual control over both a lot of people in the Republican and Democratic parties. And that's the reason no matter which party has been in power over the last 50 years, the country seems to keep moving in the same direction, the direction of global governance. George W. Bush Sr., George H.W. Bush, he was a huge proponent of a world government. He was a Republican. Clinton was a huge proponent of world government. He was a Democrat. Didn't matter whether they were Republican or Democrat, we still marched towards this one world governing body. And those who have been leading the United States steadily toward a world government have become known as the establishment. You want to know who the establishment is here in the United States? Those that believe in a world government. They've been pushing, whether they're a Democrat or a Republican. So I wanted to come to you today to make sure you understood what's going on in the news when they talk about open borders and Donald Trump says, I'm going to build a wall. Open borders would allow, we need to watch what's going on in Europe because open borders in the United States, you say, well, what would happen if we just threw our borders open? Look what's happening in Europe. They threw their borders open and look at all the terrorist actions that's happening over there. We need to take that as a warning sign here in the United States. The liberal news media likes to make fun of Donald Trump, but there are people who believe in the prophesied one world government that are standing against this, and that's Donald Trump himself, actually.
End of the Age is a production of End Time Ministries. This broadcast will be available on our website, endtime.com, in the archives section. On our website, you'll also find more information about how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. To reach our operators, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. End Time Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to our partners who made this broadcast possible. To do what Matthew 24:14 said, to reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom.